What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC 287. We have a stacked card as the UFC finally makes its return to the 305. It's been 2 decades since the UFC has last made the trip down to Miami. For those of you guys that remember that card, UFC 42, I doubt many of you guys do, headlined by the legend Matt Hughes as he defeated Sean Shirk. We had Pete Spratt and Robbie Lawler fighting on the card. Other recognizable names, Wesley Correa, Cabbage Correa, one of the most tough men we've ever seen battle in the cage. He defeated Sean Alvarez that night. Other recognizable names, Rich Franklin, Evan Tanner, rest in peace Evan Tanner. Dwayne Ludwig had a victory on the card there. Fighters like Hermes Franca and David Loazo also getting victories in the card. Unfortunately, I can't say that I attended that event live back in 2003. I was probably about 13 years old or so. I mean, not to say that that would have stopped me from making the trip down to Miami there. I was probably about an hour drive away from the arena, but unfortunately I didn't make that trip. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make the trip as the UFC makes the return to Miami. I have a wedding in the family, and I guess, there's nothing I can really do about that. So, I've been waiting for the UFC to make it back down to Miami for a long time, and I can't even make the trip there. I want to shout out everybody that's been giving me some very welcoming invitations, people saying they got tickets lined up for me and all that, but unfortunately I'm not able to capitalize on any of that. So hopefully we do that for another event in the future. Shout out to you guys. I appreciate you for all the kind invitations there. Now, straight to business, Israel Adesanya has a sweet revenge on his mind. You guys already know the story here. Alex Pereira has had Izzy's number. He tracks him all the way down to the MMA world and does the same thing to him over here that he was doing to him over in the kickboxing world. Izzy really has to show up here. It will not be a good look, especially if he gets finished again. We know that Izzy is really one of the greats of the fight game, but it's just not really a good look having this fighter just really bully you around in the combat world. And I think that Izzy needs to show up here. So we're going to be jumping into the first fight here in a second. Real quick, if you guys could, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Go follow me on all my social media, on Instagram at MMA Fortune Teller _ and on Twitter at the MMA Teller. You guys, I'm always posting dope posts, and it's the greatest way for me to interact with you guys. I love when you guys are hitting up the comment sections, letting me know what you guys think about what I'm talking about, whether it's positive, negative. I love all the feedback. I really love to debate all things MMA, so go follow me over there, especially on Instagram. I'm really always doing it up on Instagram, and I love your guys' feedback. All right, guys, so with that all being said,
The teller.
It's another day. Left jab, right jab. This is MMA. Mixed martial arts, quick body parts, undefeated when I pick 'em. Who the champ, who the victim? Looking in my crystal ball, I predict the winner. Never stop fighting. If you lose, keep your chin up. Know how the game go. I'm a smart fella. Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller.
the MMA Fortune Teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have the always fun to watch Chris Barnett, a true fan favorite in the fight game right now, taking on Sherman. Sherman, a fighter that has really had a tough time getting his hand raised, but has had continuous opportunities, probably based on the fact that he somewhat brings the fight. We know the heavyweight division is lacking. A lot of the fighters we're going to be talking about involved in breaking down this fight here, it's going to be surrounding a lot of lower level fighters. They've been competing against lower level fighters, and it's just kind of the theme of this matchup here. Again, I mean that with no disrespect, but I'm talking about when you are talking about UFC caliber fighters, we're talking about the bottom of the barrel in this division here. Chris Barnett, 5'9", and he's walking around at the max weight limit in the division. That's obviously not a solid recipe. I definitely think that he could shed some pounds. He is an athlete. We've seen him really pull off some wild athletic moves in the cage, pulling off, finishes there. recent victories, again, over lower level guys like Jean Vellante, Jake Collier, and his losses in the UFC, we saw that he was kind of bullied and has a little bit of a kryptonite for bigger, more well-rounded fighters like Martin Buday and Ben Rothwell. Shout out to Ben Rothwell. Can't wait to see him perform over in BKFC again. He's a beast. But, so we understand that Chris Barnett can kind of be bullied. His conditioning and cardio is not the best. But in a matchup like this, Chase Sherman is a fighter that really favors his striking. This is a fighter that barely attempts any types of takedowns. I think that Chase Sherman is going to be more than willing to perform in a kickboxing type match here against Barnett. Is Barnett live to land a wild wheel kick? Possibly. But realistically, when you look at some of the holes in Sherman's game, it's more so been the grappling as well. If you take a look at some of his more disappointing losses as of recently, Alexander Romanov pulled off a Kimura on him. I believe Jake Collier pulled off a rear naked choke on him, if I'm correct there. Yeah, he did. Jake Collier even pulling off a submission victory over him there. Now, in Jake Collier's last fight, in Chase Sherman's last fight, where he lost to Waldo Cortez, the Dominican boxer there, I thought that Sherman actually looked decent in that fight. He kept that fight more competitive than a lot of people would have thought. He was working in the leg kicks very well with his boxing. And I think that if this fight takes place in the feet like it should, I think that I expect Sherman to outpoint Chris Barnett. I just can't rely on Chris Barnett keeping the pace up for 15 minutes. And I got to say that Chase Sherman outvolumes Chris Barnett. If this fight goes down to the mat, I'd be curious to see how this goes. And Chris Barnett's last victory, he did get on top of Jake Collier. And, if a guy like Chris Barnett gets on top of you, that obviously could be a major problem, even for a guy like Sherman. I mean, all that weight on top of Sherman, I could see Sherman being stuck down there. Maybe he gets finished up down on the mat. But I would say that that's a little bit less likely compared to the more likely situation of Sherman just outpointing Barnett there. I mean, we'll keep an eye on how Barnett looks at the weigh-ins, but I expect a little bit more of the same. Chase Sherman, a minus 240 favorite here. That's going to be a common theme on this fight card. A lot of hefty favorites here, okay? I think that this card may value the dogs. I think that if you put $100 or $1,000 on every underdog on this card, I think that you probably would come out profitable. But you guys know how we do it here. We'll analyze these lines here. I'm not necessarily crazy about a minus 240 line next to Chase Sherman's name, really against anybody in the UFC. That being said, I do expect him to outpoint Barnett here, and I'm really not that sure if I would even want to put some money up on a guy like Chris Barnett at almost 2-1 underdog odds, just based on the fact that if he doesn't land that wild shot or some type of fluke situation doesn't happen where his opponent shoots a sloppy takedown and he falls on top of them, he's going to really just be breathing heavy and get picked apart there, I think. So give me Chase Sherman to win. Maybe Barnett even kind of gasses out and Sherman can somehow get a finish in the third round, but most likely I'll go a unanimous decision for Chase Sherman there. So as Jaqueline Amorim leaves her LFA championship belt over there in the LFA promotion, she'll still bring with her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as she looks to make her UFC debut against Sam Hughes. Amorim, if you guys have been watching her, we know that she's a very impressive grappler. One of her fights, she showcased that she is working on her striking. We saw her land a big overhand right as she dropped her opponent. But obviously, if you know what you're watching, she still needs to fine-tune her striking very much so. One thing I've noticed too is, once she gets the fight down to the mat, she's definitely extremely high caliber, but I haven't been that impressed with her entries. Her wrestling and her takedowns are pretty much telegraphed. But you know what? As I'm breaking down tape on Sam Hughes in her last fight, she gets taken down by Pereira Rodriguez, as Pereira Rodriguez completely telegraphs her takedown attempt as well. So I really don't have any faith that Sam Hughes is going to be able to keep this fight from touching the mat at one point in time. And when this fight does touch the mat, I think that Sam Hughes will be outgunned down there. Now, it's worth noting that Sam Hughes did have an impressive performance against I think it was against Elise Reed just a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago or so, where she showcased her grappling and was using her ground and pound and whatnot. But again, I still do believe that she will be outgunned there. I think that there's levels to the grappling, and she's not going to want to have this fight touch the mat. Now on the feet, you have a matchup here of, Sam Hughes, a little bit more technical with her boxing. She's shown some growth there. She's a little bit more patient and technical. She throws her boxing shots a little bit more crisp. She's more seasoned there. But you know what? We talked about how Jaqueline is working on her striking. I think that Jaqueline will be a little bit quicker and a little bit more raw there as well. So even though she's not as technically sound, I could still see Jaqueline being quicker to land a big shot than even Sam Hughes. She could be vulnerable to be countered with a shot from Sam Hughes. It's kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky to analyze how it's going to take place in the feet because, Sam Hughes is a little bit more technical and a little bit more by the book, but Amorim is evolving. She's only 27 years old, and she kind of has that scrappy and kind of fast type of striking, if you guys know what I'm talking about. Kind of like an old cat fight. After a day of school, as you guys make your way over to the park, you guys know what I'm talking about. She's tough. She's confident. She's going to come forward. And the reason why she's so confident as well is that she knows that she could rely on her jiu-jitsu. If she throws a sloppy attack on the feet and she's taken down, in reality, not a lot of her opponents are even going to want to try to take her down, so she can get a little sloppy with her striking. So Amorim, 27 years old. She's going to be at a 2-inch height disadvantage, if you want to call it that, but she actually will have about a 3.5-inch reach advantage. You take a look at her 6 pro wins. She's finished all of them. 1 via knockout, the fight we talked about there. The other fights, 5 submission victories. Now, when you take a look at Sam Hughes' 5 pro losses, she's only been submitted once. So not necessarily showing a deficiency in her submission defensive skill set. But she hasn't really been fighting a lot of upper echelon type of grapplers in the division. And, again, when you break down the tape on Jaqueline Amorim, you could just tell that she's very high caliber. And I still think that she's going to give Hughes some issues down there. I think that the submission victory for Jaqueline is very, very realistic here. We'll take a look at the betting line. And we're going to see the UFC newcomer taking on a veteran like Sam Hughes. She's still a -250 favorite. Again, I told you guys this is going to be a very common theme throughout this fight card. A lot of hefty favorites right around the mid -200s. And here we go. We have the newcomer at a -250. I will say this as well, real quick as we talk about this betting line. Jaqueline hasn't necessarily fought the most stiff competition over an LFA. She's fought some fighters that were more striking based, and she was able to really exploit their grappling. Now, if Sam Hughes can show off some good hips, keep this fight standing, there is definitely potential for her to win a decision here. But I definitely got to lean that the newcomer gets the job done here. I've been pretty impressed from what I've seen from her, and I still think that her sloppy takedowns will end up working, and she'll get this fight down to the mat, and she'll pull off that sub, or she'll dominate down in the mat just however she wants. If Hughes can survive and not be submitted, she'll still be dominated down there. Jaqueline will transition and move all around her. Maybe she could try to evolve with her ground and pound a little bit as well, because Jaqueline hasn't really shown any solid ground and pound. Her striking down there in the mat is very low level in my opinion, but the threat of the submission is very realistic. Where do I see the value when we're talking about this line here? I really just don't see value anywhere here personally. I think maybe you want to look for a submission prop on Jaqueline, maybe an under, and just maybe there's more value on the +200 line on Sam Hughes if I'm going to be fair here. But I want to be very clear that I'm very high on the submission and the grappling of Jaqueline Amorim, and I think that she comes in here and takes out the UFC veteran in Sam Hughes. So in only Joseph Pyfer's second UFC fight, he gets matched up with the submission king of the middleweight division, Gerald Meerschaert. I know we pull off the record books here. Gerald Meerschaert with 9 submission victories in the UFC's middleweight division. That is the most of all time there. Of course, you have Demian Maia at 11. We all initially knew Demian Maia as a middleweight, but remember, he did drop down to the welterweight division and has a good amount of subs in that division as well. So, technically, Meerschaert is the middleweight kingpin there. Besides that, Gerald Meerschaert has been refining his striking. We know that he made the move down to King Cliff FC, or whatever they want to call that gym right now. We know it as Sanford MMA, that gym wants to continuously change up the name, so don't put me to the fire there. I believe it's King Cliff or whatever. named after some type of granola bar. But the point is that he's been putting in work with Henry Hooft. He looked very good in his last fight against Bruno Silva. We know Bruno Silva is a very dangerous fighter. That was a big-time victory for Gerald. And just as of recently, Gerald's really been putting it together. Let's just take a quick look and admire the work that he's been putting in as he now has 50 professional fights compared to the very minuscule amount of pro fights that Pyfer has at 12 when you put them side by side. But Gerald Meerschaert, that victory over Bruno Silva that we just talked about, he had the decision loss against Krzysztof Jotko, but before that, submission victories over Dustin Stoltzfus, Makhmud Meredov, and Bartosz Fabinski. He had the knockout loss to Khamzat Chimaev, which we do need to talk about here, right? I think that the danger to Gerald in this fight will be the fact that Pyfer is a very dangerous knockout artist, as we just saw again against Alen Amadovsky in his last fight, in his UFC debut. I don't necessarily think that Gerald has a major chin issue. Sometimes he's a little lacking with his defense and kind of freezes up like a deer in headlights at times. But I wouldn't say he's overwhelmingly been finished in the UFC due to strikes. There was the Khamzat loss. It was the Ian Heinisch knockout loss. And then other than that, you got to scroll all the way down to his Thiago Santos fight that he had in 2017. But in the meantime, battling with some of the best fighters in the division, submitting guys like Trevin Giles, who we just saw get a victory in the UFC once again, victories over Duran Win, Oscar Pichota, Eric Spicely, some fighters dating back to then. So again, he has 50 pro fights compared to the 12 pro fights of Joseph Pyfer, and Pyfer's only second UFC fight. I think that there is a major discrepancy in experience here. Gerald, 35 years old. I don't think at that age it's like he's necessarily over the hump. I think that he may be in the prime of his career right now, coming off that Silva victory. He's going to have a 2.5-inch reach advantage, even though he's 1 inch shorter compared to Pyfer there. I don't necessarily think that Meerschaert by any means should look to duke it out with Pyfer on the feet. I definitely think that Pyfer is live for that knockout there. We talked about those 3 knockout losses that Gerald Meerschaert has taken over the years. I think that there's a very realistic possibility that Pyfer becomes the 4th man to do that in the octagon. But if he doesn't land that big shot, I do believe that we could see him face some real adversity against a guy in GM3 that just checks off a lot of boxes, but most importantly, the submission threat and the grappling threat that GM3 is, as this fight goes into the deep waters, and GM3 will look to really take control of the wheel in this fight. I've been very much back and forth with who I'm going to pick on this fight. If I'm being realistic with you guys, I literally have bounced back and forth, literally up to the minute right now, where I'm going to give you guys my decision. Initially, I was on Pyfer. I think that the youth of Pyfer and the striking ability that he has, the confidence that coming off his UFC debut victory that he just had where he knocked out Amadovsky and all that, I think that he's going to come out here and look to use his footwork and set up that big shot. But I'm going to say that Meerschaert avoids that big shot and just has a lot of things that he can rely on here as this fight goes into the 2nd and 3rd rounds, if it goes there. I'm going to take GM3 to get the job done here. I'll take the true veteran who's really putting in some heavy work from what I've seen right now with the new gym, and he's trying to prove himself right now, and he knows that this young gun's coming after him, and I think that he's going to rise to the occasion here. So let's go with GM3. We'll throw a dog your way. Let's pull up the betting line. GM3 is a plus 155 underdog. The comeback on Pyfer at minus 190. At the very least, I think the value is on GM3 here. It may not look like it if Pyfer goes out there and starches him, but just understand that that's a realistic avenue. But GM3 just needs to avoid that early adversity and shoot takedowns, close the distance, and make this a grueling fight where I think he could take it over. Give me the dog there and Gerald Meerschaert with obvious value, in my opinion, at that plus 155 line. Kelvin Gastelum taking on the action man, Chris Curtis. First and foremost, major respect to Chris Curtis. I think that he's one of the more underrated fighters in the fight game right now. And if you guys remember the way that he worked his way into the UFC, having that victory on Dana White's Contender Series, not getting the contract, going over into other promotions, continuously doing his thing, finally getting an opportunity with the UFC, coming in as an underdog like he consistently was, because people just didn't really know what he was about, shocking the world, knocking out some of the best fighters in the world, literally all the way up to even his last fight, right? Getting a major knockout victory where he just starched Joaquin Buckley. who we know is a very dangerous fighter, but knockout victories as of recently over Brendan Allen, who's a major contender right now, Phil Hawes. And he's had 5 fights in the last year and 3 months. He's been very active. He's a very well-rounded fighter. We know that he's a technician on the feet. We know that he carries dynamite in his hands and in all aspects of his striking. But he has good takedown defense. He's just a very polished fighter, in my opinion. His one recent loss was to Jack Hermanson. Jack Hermanson, a very crafty grappler, and he was able to edge the action man there. But other than that, Curtis has been doing his thing. Kelvin Gastelum, on the other hand, he just hasn't been that active. He's been losing fights, and the fights that he's been losing in, I mean, if we're going to be realistic, it is to some of the best fighters on planet Earth. You know, losses to Jared Cannonier, Robert Whittaker, Jack Hermanson as well, and the Darren Till split decision loss. I actually did think that Gastelum should have took that fight, and his one lone victory in his last 5 fights was against Ian Heinisch. I mean, Gastelum, he's only 31 years old, believe it or not. It seems like he should be like 40 at this point in time. If you remember watching him on The Ultimate Fighter, like I did back when that season took place, he was an extremely young fighter on that show. He was the last fighter picked. He has continuously rose to the occasion, at least throughout the first 3/4 of his UFC career. We know that he went to the deep waters with Izzy. He was really the first fighter to really bring it to Izzy. We know that he has the wrestling ability, but a lot of times he just doesn't seem to use his wrestling. He's very comfortable striking on the feet, and I think that could be a little bit of an issue for him here against the Action Man. I have a feeling that he's not going to really press the wrestling that much. He might shoot a couple shots early on, but even if he does, I expect the Action Man to have success stuffing those, and I think that this will be a little bit of a kickboxing striking type match, and I'm favoring Curtis here. I am favoring Curtis. Let's take a look at how they match up physically. Curtis is going to have about a 4-inch reach advantage on the feet. Curtis will be an inch taller, nothing really going on there, but Curtis will have that advantage in the arm length as they look to duke it out. Kelvin Gastelum will have to do something that he's done in the past, which is use his footwork to get on the inside. He's had success at times, but as of recently, he really hasn't been using his footwork properly to get in on the inside. Gastelum has that lackadaisical approach. You remember him on some of the embedded episodes leading up to some of his bigger fights. You see him rolling out of bed. It seems like there's roaches, and I'm not talking about cockroaches. I'm talking about little joint roaches on the side of his bed. You see that he hasn't done his laundry in a couple months. And he's just rolling out of bed. You see the oil stains on his sheets. Probably hasn't washed his sheets in a couple months as well. I don't know, something about him, and I'm not trying to hate him. The guy just seems like he's a little bit too easygoing. I think that he maybe should just be on a beach somewhere, sipping on a Corona, smoking a joint, and he finds himself locked in a cage, battling with some of the biggest killers in the world. Now, there's no doubt Gastelum is a stud in his own right, but he has a good amount of mileage on him as well. We talked about how he's 31 years old. He only has, I shouldn't say he only has, but he has 20. Here we go. He has 25 pro fights, which is a decent number. I mean, you look at Curtis. Curtis has 39 pro fights. But we've seen Gastelum take that damage in the octagon. We've seen him go to war. We mentioned the Izzy fight. I don't know why. I feel like Curtis is the more fresh fighter, even though he's 35. That's just the way I feel when I break down tape and I watch the recent fights. It's just, I'm edging Chris Curtis here. Like I said, I'm going to favor him in the striking department. And I think this fight will take place on the feet. It'll be a little bit of a kickboxing match. The number 14th ranked middleweight fighter, Curtis, defeats Kelvin Gastelum via decision. Kelvin has shown that he's extremely tough. He could take a shot. I don't know if Curtis necessarily shuts his lights off. You take a look at Gastelum's 8 losses and 0 KO, TKO losses. So he has shown to have a granite chin. He's only been subbed twice as well. He's extremely durable. I think that Curtis just lands the cleaner shots and edges that decision there. So I am going to go with Chris Curtis. And let's go pull up this betting line because it's going to be a very close line here. Chris Curtis is going to be a -110 with Gastelum also being a -110. This is a straight up pick 'em on Bovada right now. You're able to pick your poison. I'm picking Chris Curtis. I think that he takes this fight. Again, an extremely underrated fighter. You take a look at his resume and some of the work that he's put in over the years. You know the fighters that he's training with on a regular basis, some of the best in the business over in Vegas and whatnot. You got guys like Sean Strickland, of course, but a lot of other top-tier fighters that walk around his weight. Give me Chris Curtis to win a unanimous decision here, or at the very least a split decision, but he gets the nod as this fight goes to the judges' scorecards. In the featherweight division, we got Steve Garcia taking on Shayilan Nuerdanbieke. Steve Garcia coming off a big victory, a much-needed victory where he was able to go out there and finish Chase Hooper. Let's all be honest here. Although, I'll even say I was on Hooper. If you guys remember what I said, there was more value on the Garcia line, but I did edge Hooper to win that fight, and as did a lot of people. And Hooper was a decent favorite going into that match. Of course, hindsight is 2020. We all kind of should have saw the writing on the wall. I mean, we know that Hooper is very vulnerable to being hit with big shots. And props to Garcia for being able to go in there and implement that. But again, Hooper is a fighter that's lacking very much defensively. And I think that there's a lot of fighters that if they just use their takedown defense and use their footwork properly, can set up some big shots and finish Hooper. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of that, but I think that there's a lot of guys in the roster that if they can just be disciplined, can starch Hooper. All right, so props to him for doing that, but I'm still not that high on Garcia. You guys know I faded him in his fight before Hooper as an official play that I did take on Meerschaert. Meerschaert got the early knockout victory on him. And you take a look at his resume. I mean, he had a victory over Charlie on Taveros before that. Charlie is a guy that should never be fighting in the UFC. He more so took advantage of hopping in on short notice at one point in time, in the UFC kind of owing him some favors there. A loss to Violent Bob Ross before that. And I just think that if you slide through his resume, there's really nothing that impressive going on. Maybe besides a victory over Ronnie Lawrence, a decision victory back in the day. Other than that, losses to OGs like Joe Warren, Alan Cruz. Alan Cruz was working at Publix at the time as he went in there and submitted him, and not a lot of recognizable names there. So I'm just not that high in Steve Garcia. He has some decent power in his hands. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. It's just he does everything pretty low level. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke is a fighter that just went against a guy in his last opponent, in Derek Minner, who was trying to throw the fight on purpose. You guys know the whole backstory with that, and him and James Krause. I mean, if you watch the tape on that fight, it was clear as day. I'll briefly go over that real quick. I mean, Minner throws a leg kick, and he winces as if he hurts his leg, and then continuously throws that same leg as he's backpedaling, and Nuerdanbieke's going in on him. Basically, he was trying whatsoever to not throw hands when that's the thing that you should result back to, right? You hurt your leg. Why are you not throwing your hands as you're getting bombarded? It's because he didn't want to risk accidentally getting a knockout or, accidentally teeing off on Nuerdanbieke, and they knew what the game plan was there. Nuerdanbieke gets on top of Minner, and Minner's obviously trying to throw the fight. He's just kind of balling up, and Nuerdanbieke can't even posture up and land some heavy shots and give Minner an easy out. So I really wasn't that impressed with Nuerdanbieke when you look at that fight there. But before that, I should mention the fact that Nuerdanbieke, he's 28 years old. He has almost 50 pro fights as well, 49 pro fights. This will be his 50th pro fight. He has victories over guys like TJ Brown, Sean Siriano, had that loss to Josh Coulibaugh, which doesn't look bad at all these days. We know Coulibaugh is really hitting his groove. So Nuerdanbieke is a very stocky, stout fighter here. Steve Garcia will have a 6-inch reach advantage. He will be 4 inches taller. He's the much more lengthy opponent. It's also worth noting that out of Steve Garcia's 13 pro victories, he does not have one submission victory, where if you really want to look at Nuerdanbieke and say that the one department maybe where he's lacking the most, you would say maybe his submission defense. He's been sub 5 times out of his 10 losses. Half of his losses come by via sub. He's only been knocked out twice. I think that he will be able to hang with Garcia, and I don't think that the power of Garcia will be too much of a threat to him there. He has decent movement. He comes in phenomenal shape. I'm going to edge Shayilan Nuerdanbieke to take this fight here. Let's go take a look at the betting line. If I'm being quite honest, this is one of the more lackluster fights on the card. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke, a minus 230 favorite. The comeback on Garcia plus 185. I think that the value is more so on Steve Garcia Jr. here, plus 185. There's not even a question to me. I'm not really crazy about that minus 230 line. We talked about it earlier, how there's going to be a lot of lines like this in that mid minus 200 range. I'm not exactly sure what Nuerdanbieke has done to prove that he should be a minus 230 favorite against a guy like Steve Garcia. Yes, I think that he has shown to be slightly the better fighter here and shows a little bit of an avenue to go in here and get the better of Garcia. But a minus 230 favorite, no. Value on the dog and Steve Garcia. I think that Shayilan Nuerdanbieke gets the job done. Maybe he touches the chin of Garcia. Maybe we see another fellow countryman, like his, I believe his teammate, or at least his fellow countryman in Meerschaert, who got the knockout. Maybe you see him repeat the process there and get that knockout. Steve Garcia will bring the fight, and he's vulnerable to being hit with the big shot as well as he looks for a big shot. Give me Shayilan Nuerdanbieke to get the job done. Possibly getting a knockout victory, but we'll see about that. We got the Karate Hottie stepping back in the cage. She's taking on a young and up-and-coming fighter. I mean, we should call her young. I mean, she's on the edge of hitting 30, but doesn't have a lot of UFC and a lot of pro fights under her resume. She still has a lot to prove in Luana Pinheiro. We know that the Karate Hottie has been around the block for a long time, as you see her putting in the dance moves here with the Stallion Holly Holm. And you see, speaking of Beast Boy Chris Barnett, you see him sliding in to the messages. He says that if I don't get in one of these videos soon, I swear. So, how many of you guys want to see Chris Barnett slide up in the middle of Holly Holm and the Karate Hottie? That'd be a fun video there. I'm sure some of you guys are into that type of stuff. But back to business here. The Karate Hottie, she's now 37 years old, as Luana Pinheiro only 29 years old. Luana with only 11 pro fights. Michelle Waterson now 28 pro fights. Now, Michelle Waterson has really been having a tough time getting the job done as of recently, but do understand that she's been fighting some of the top fighters in the world. Losses to Amanda Lemos, Marina Rodriguez. She had a victory over Angela Hill. A lot of people thought that she should have lost that fight, but nevertheless, she had that fight play out closely. Before that, lost to Carla Esparza and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I mean, so seriously, really losing to some of the best women in her respected weight class. So no real shame there. The thing that I'm more worried about right now is the fact that she's 37 years old, and Luana will have that youthfulness on her side. She has good footwork. I think that she'll be quicker and more explosive. She has shown that she has fight-ending abilities. You take a look at her 10 wins, 3 of them via knockout, 4 of them via sub. So 7 of her 10 victories have come by way of finish. She's a well-rounded fighter. I think that Michelle Waterson has the ability to maybe stifle her. Maybe you see some of those head and arm throws. Maybe she controls her down in the mat, avoids the sub there, and kind of gets some control time. One thing that I am questioning Luana about a little bit is her mental game, right? If you remember, in her second most recent fight, not in the Sam Hughes fight that she just went out and took, but in her fight before that, where she fought Randa Marcos, she was hit with an up kick. And it's hard for me to sit back on my couch and say, oh, she should have continued and it wasn't that big of a shot. I don't want to be one of those types of guys that's sitting on my couch, with my fingers all buttered up and the popcorn pointing at the screen. But I'm sorry, if I'm being honest, I feel like fighters like a Randa Marcos, if the tables were turned, I feel like Randa Marcos would be jumping at the bit for the referee to continue that fight and for her to charge her opponent. Whereas Luana took the route where she was blinking her eyes and took the victory there due to an illegal kick by Randa Marcos. So I just question her mindset if this fight goes to the deep waters. We know Michelle Waterson is completely game. We've seen her really be in some fights that played out very closely all the way up to the 15-minute mark, and she'll go to war. And even really fighting in 25-minute fights, right? I believe even fighting in a main event before as well. So I think that she's a lot more proven there. That being said, I am going to side with the youth here in Luana Pinheiro. I think that she'll use her footwork, and her quickness and her explosiveness to edge this fight. She has shown that she is a finisher. I don't know if she necessarily goes out here and finishes a girl like Waterson, who's very tough. But as we take a look at the betting line, Michelle Waterson at plus 145, I think there's more value next to her name there. Again, I told you guys kind of the narrative of this fight card is if you kind of rolled with the dogs throughout every fight, I think that you would probably profit more so than attacking the favorites here. But I still got to lean Luana Pinheiro. Michelle Waterson is really getting up there in age, and Luana has shown to be very talented in some aspects of her game. Again, the quickness, the striking, the explosiveness. I'm going to say that she looks to be the best version of herself here, as she hasn't even hit 30 yet, and she'll edge Michelle Waterson, who is getting up there in age. So give me Luana Pinheiro, but the minus 175 line, I'm not really digging it. I think that this is a fight that could really, it could really almost go any way. So the value has to be on the plus 145 line in Waterson. So I'm actually really digging this fight here, taking place in the strawweight division. Cynthia Calvillo dropping down a weight from the flyweight division. She'll be taking on Lupi Godinez. You guys know Lupi consistently comes into her fights as a favorite. Everybody fearing Lupi just based on the fact that she has that wrestling background. You see her putting in some work over here with her sister. I believe it may be her twin sister. I don't know. They look just alike, but Anna Paula Godinez. And, again, I do believe the fact that she consistently comes in as a favorite is based on the fact that she has that wrestling background. And when she puts everything together, she's a very dangerous fighter. She's been working on her boxing. But let's be honest about her UFC career up until this point. I mean, let's take a look. She's 29 years old, so she's still very young, just 11 pro fights. But in the UFC, she has already taken losses in her debut against Jessica Penne. She came into that fight as a big-time favorite. She was the former LFA champion, right? She was the LFA champion coming into that fight. She let that fight play out very closely. Some people thought she edged it, but still lost to the very aged Jessica Penne, who was coming off a very long layoff. She submitted Silvana Gomez Juarez, an older fighter that doesn't really have a lot of experience. Then she loses to Luana Carolina. Now, that was a fighter that she was taking on that had a size advantage against her, and Luana really used that there. But we've seen, especially recently, that Luana is just really not on the level as far as the skills go. I mean, she's a tough customer and whatnot, but you would think that Lupi could have got the better of her there, and the size gave her some problems. Luana was able to stuff her takedowns. Victory over Loma Legbunmi, who is working on her overall craft, but she's more of a Muay Thai striking-based fighter who's been working on things. Victory over Ariane Cornalosi, the juice head there. And then Angela Hill, she just lost to Angela Hill. So now she's taking on Cynthia Calvillo, who Cynthia's been having a tough time as of recently too, and I think there's definitely some things going on outside the cage. I think that she really needs to get her mind straight. She has a lot of strong skills that she brings into the cage. She just needs to really ground herself, in my opinion. Coming off split decision loss to Nina Nunez, lost to Andrea Lee. She got finished there. I believe she got stopped on the stool in between rounds. Got knocked out against Jessica Andrade. Lost to Caitlin Chikogian. We are talking about some serious fighters, though, when you're talking about Chikogian, Andrade, and even Andrea Lee is a tough customer. A lot of people thought she should have just got the victory against Macy Barber the other night. Victories over Pauliana Botella, Courtney Casey, Joanne Wood, Pearl Gonzalez, Amanda ABC Cooper, Jillian Robertson back in the day. As of recently, she had that big main event victory over Jessica Ai back in 2020, where she really used her boxing to get the victory there. You see Cynthia hitting the pads here. So like I said, she's going down to the strawweight division. I think that could be better for her if she sheds some weight and she's a little bit more on her toes and she's moving around better. I like the size advantage that she's going to have in this fight. She is the more naturally larger fighter here as we take a look at how they match up physically, right? Let's take a look at this real quick. Cynthia, she's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. She's going to be 2 inches taller, and she'll have a 2-inch leg reach as well, but she will have the more naturally larger frame. Cynthia has a wrestling background as well. I think that if she could stifle Lupi with those takedown attempts and keep this fight on the feet, it could play out closely, but I wouldn't be shocked if the veteran in Cynthia gets the better of those striking exchanges. Lupi, again, sometimes she just doesn't really show up, and I think that if Cynthia comes in motivated here, she most definitely can rise to the occasion, and she seems to be very motivated for this fight from what I'm seeing on IG. It's 20 days. This is 20 days out. This was this is about a week ago, and it looks to be in good shape in my opinion. It looks to be a little bit more toned, and that's something that's important for her going into this fight. Again, she has to be moving quickly. She has to be a fresh and quick Cynthia here, a motivated Cynthia, and I'm gonna edge Cynthia Calvillo to pull this fight off. I'm gonna say that she does come in checking off those boxes here. So let's take a look at the betting line, where we're gonna see a similar betting line here, with Lupi Godinez actually touching that minus 300 line right now. She's a minus 300 favorite, and then you get to come back on Cynthia Calvillo at plus 230. I obviously feel that there's more value on the plus 230 line on Cynthia here. I most definitely do, and I'm even edging her to get the fight done. I just think that the line's off here. I really honestly do. I think that the line is off. I understand why a lot of people are high on Lupita, and if Lupita comes in and she's sharp and she's mixing in takedowns and she's just it just proves to be a more youthful, motivated fighter. Yeah, she's going to go out there and she's going to get the job done. But if Cynthia can come into this fight really with some passion, I think that she has the skill set to take this fight. So I'm going to edge Cynthia Calvillo on a big fight card like this. I think she rises to the occasion. Let's see how that fight goes. Kevin Holland taking on Santiago Ponzinibbio. Now, a lot of you guys know my past beef with Kevo, and I want to be completely unbiased when I'm doing the breakdown for this fight, because although maybe some of you guys are not going to agree with what I'm saying here, time will tell if I'm right or wrong, but I do strongly believe this is a tough matchup for Kevin Holland, and I'm going to tell you guys why here. Kevin Holland losing 2 fights in a row. We know that he just lost to Wonderboy, a fight that I was able to watch live. It was really a treat for me to watch one of my favorite fighters in the game in Wonderboy style, and one of my arch nemesis in Kevin Holland. Real quickly, Gamebred, Jorge Masvidal, recently on the Joe Rogan Experience brought up a point that I very much agreed with. I think people put they put too much stock into the fact that Kevin Holland was willing to go out there and just strike with Wonderboy as if he had this ultimate ability where he could have just used his offensive wrestling to drag that fight down to the mat at will. And I really did believe, and I did agree with what Masvidal said, that he would have struggled to get those takedowns, and it would have more so burned his gas tank. And we may have seen Wonderboy even get a finish earlier in that fight. Props to Kevin for, at one point in time being on top of Thompson as he fell on top of him and getting back up and putting on a striking display for the fans, eventually leading to him getting finished there, not being able to answer to round 5. And with all the beef that we had in that whole incident, if you don't know about it, we can hit the comment section. I can kind of brush upon that for you guys there. You guys know it's all fun from my perspective, and I do respect Holland in a lot of ways. I think he's a fun fighter. But again, real quick, coming off 2 losses, the Khamzat loss that he took, and then the Wonderboy loss, although these are big names, if he loses here against Ponzinibbio, that's 3 in a row, and that's a major blemish. Those are major blemishes on his resume based on the fact that he was on the verge of really becoming a star in the game. And I think that will set him back a little bit, if I'm being honest. I think that people will still always be excited to watch him perform. He's a very fan-pleasing fighter, but I think he'll take a step down from being a star in the sport, or that he was on the potential of being a star. And I don't know if you guys can see this here, but we see a comment from 7 weeks ago. Ponzinibbio via second round KO. Don't at me. The Teller poking some fun, not getting any likes over on Trailblazers IG. Maybe you guys should go support the Teller. Like that comment there. I'm not necessarily agreeing that that's what's going to happen. I'm obviously poking some fun there. I'm going to tell you my prediction here in a second. But I want to point out some facts to you guys real quick. Okay, take a look at Santiago Ponzinibbio here right now. He's 29-6 as a pro. Out of his 6 losses, 2 of those losses have came by way of knockout via TKO. We're talking about a fighter that has battled 35 times, and only 2 times has he been knocked out or TKO there, which I do believe is Kevin Holland's real threat to get the job done here. He's never been submitted. So we know that Holland has some tricky subs as well. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, has those long limbs, can pull off the arses and this and that. Santiago has never been subbed. And then you had the 3 decision losses there. If Kevin Holland doesn't get the finish here, I think that he may be in trouble on the feet. We saw what Wonderboy was able to do recently. And you know what? I don't know if that was really Wonderboy really putting on a display of his amazing ability. I think that Wonderboy has aged and he's really not the same fighter. I think that that's just a little bit of the product of what Kevin Holland is, if you ask me. And as you see me brushing shoulders with Santiago here, and I was in his ear telling him, handle my lightweight, this April, I need you to go in there and take out Kevo. But on a serious note, I was not that impressed with the way that Kevin Holland let an aged Wonderboy kind of tee off on him. I think that Santiago, let's take a look at the work that he's been putting in. I think that it's very respectable. Coming off a knockout victory over Alex Morono in the 3rd round, always digging deep. The Michelle Pereira fight, a lot of people thought that he possibly took that fight. That was a war, and he really showcased his skills in that fight as well. That even though it says loss, that was a W, no matter how you spin it. Just the will that he showed in that fight. A split decision loss to Jeff Neal. That was a split loss as well. All right, Jeff Neal, one of the more dangerous fighters in the game right now. So going toe-to-toe with him there, taking out the young gun and Miguel Baeza. Then he had the knockout loss to Li Jingliang. There. And then, victories over Neil Magny, Mike Perry, Gunnar Nelson, Nordine Taleb, Zach Cummings, Court McGee. These are legitimate fighters, okay? Santiago Ponzinibbio is a dangerous fighter. He's a dangerous striker. And even though he's 36 years old, he is still shown to be stepping into these fights ready to throw down. And I think that he'll get the better of the striking exchanges with Kevin Holland. I think he'll be a little bit more physically strong. Kevin Holland, drops the first round to Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Came back and got the finish there, but losing that first round to Cowboy Oliveira, I just think that Santiago Ponzinibbio is going to show to really surprise a lot of you guys in this matchup here. Kevin Holland will have an 8-inch reach advantage. He will be 3 inches taller. I think that Santiago closes the distance, and he's a little bit more stout and a little bit more physically strong as they lock horns in the clinch and as they begin to strike. I think this fight takes place on the feet, and I wouldn't even be shocked if it goes down to the mat that Santiago is the guy that's on top and is sitting in Kevin Holland's guard as he's trying to throw up some tricky subs and whatnot. I don't see Kevin Holland using any type of offensive wrestling to dominate the ground game there either. I am honestly taking Santiago Ponzinibbio to win this fight, and I'm very curious to see how this fight plays out. It could be sitting here eating my words, and you guys can hit the comment section, come back and hit the comment section up and let me know if I was wrong after we see how this plays out. But I think that Santiago, even if he loses this fight, you'll see it's going to be a very competitive fight, and the line will be off. Because let's go take a look at this betting line, where you're going to see Kevin Holland is a minus 290 favorite. How is he a minus 290 favorite against Santiago Ponzinibbio? People are disrespecting Ponz here. Plus 230 line on him. That's straight value, in my opinion. At the very least, this is a fight that should be... it should have a very close betting line next to it, in my opinion. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, I could be eating my words here, or I could be sounding like a pure genius when Ponzinibbio goes out there and just styles on Holland in this matchup here. So we'll see how that plays out. Comment below. Let me know if you think I'm going to be right or wrong ahead of time so we see where you stood. Perfect matchmaking by the UFC here. The youngster Raul Rosas Jr. taking on C-Rod Christian Rodriguez, a fighter that I'm very high on, who's coming off a big-time victory where he pulled off the submission against Joshua Weems, pulled off that anaconda choke there. Raul Rosas Jr. coming off that rear naked choke victory over Jay Perrin. So both fighters getting submission victories over lower-level opponents, but still give them credit for showing up and doing what they should have done. It's crazy to think that C-Rod will have a 7-year age advantage, I guess, if you want to call it there. I mean, he is 7 years older. It's kind of weird. Do you want to call it an advantage or not? Because the way Raul Rosas Jr. is performing, it's almost like the fact that he's a young kid helps him out with the gas tank, and just this kid can push like no other. I mean, I truly believe that the pace that he's been pushing in his fights is as good as we've ever seen. He loves to use his wrestling, loves to use his jiu-jitsu, likes to close the distance and really get a hold of his opponents. C-Rod did have trouble in his UFC debut, if you guys remember, against JSP, Jonathan Pierce. And at the time, C-Rod was at a major disadvantage, if you ask me, from an age perspective. JSP really just was a more mature fighter at the time. JSP has that wrestling pedigree, and C-Rod is a fighter that's still learning. He's still so young. And I think that JSP took advantage of that there. Will Raul be able to implement a similar game plan? Do understand that C-Rod is a very tricky grappler as well. I mean, he's alive to pull off a sub, and he's a very polished fighter. He's a well-rounded fighter at this point in time. But I do believe that Raul will have the possibility to use that similar game plan, which is no real surprise to you guys, right? I mean, he does it so well. Obviously, there's a realistic avenue that he goes out there and does that. On the feet, I'm going to say that C-Rod might be the more technical striker here. At least when you slow things down, he might be the more technical and composed and talented striker. But Raul is just a tornado, man. He's a ball of energy, and he might be a little bit more wild and explosive, mixing in with the takedowns. It might just be a little bit too much for C-Rod, in my opinion. And that will point me in Raul Rosas Jr.'s direction. I just really been impressed with the pace that he pushes, and I could see him getting the better of those grappling exchanges on C-Rod. I could see C-Rod hunting for some submissions at times and maybe stuffing a takedown here or there. But the nonstop pressure of Raul I just have to feel that's going to pay dividends in this fight here. C-Rod will need to keep this fight standing. Maybe he can land a couple big shots. Maybe we could see Raul Rosas' striking defense start to let him down, because I haven't been completely sold on his striking in general. I think that he does need to evolve there more so. I think that he has the potential to really elevate that part of his game as well. He is explosive and whatnot, but it needs to be refined most definitely. Whereas Christian Rodriguez is a more refined striker at this point in time. So a little bit of a stylistic clash, but that's not really the best way to sum up this fight, because C-Rod is a very well-rounded fighter as well. I think that the winner of this fight is going to be coming out with some extreme momentum. Again, if you guys aren't familiar with Christian Rodriguez, remember, he had a big victory on Dana White's Contender Series. He's been getting nothing but rave reviews since that point in time, fighting out of Team Rufus Sport. A lot of the big names in the game that trained over at that gym have constantly saying that he's going to grow up to be a future star in the sport. Right, he's been brushing shoulders with guys like Anthony Pettis, Felder, all those types of guys for years. And you take a look at what he brings to the table right now. Just 9 pro fights compared to Raul Rosas' 7 pro fights. Both these guys, not an overwhelming amount of pro fights, but that's to be expected. They're still so young. Christian Rodriguez, out of his 8 wins, 3 KOs, 4 subs. So showing that diversity in his game like we talked about. And again, with Raul Rosas, you're seeing also a much more submission heavy game plan, right? 5 submission victories out of his 7 pro victories there. He's undefeated. So both guys, Christian Rodriguez will actually have about a 1-inch reach advantage there, even though he's a little bit on the shorter side compared to Raul Rosas Jr. I'm very excited for this fight. Let's go take a look at the betting line. And we will see that Raul Rosas Jr. is a minus 240 favorite against Christian Rodriguez. What have I been telling you guys? I know I'm repeating myself here, but again, it's that same type of betting line where I'm telling you that there's a lot of live dogs here. I got to lean with my boy Raul Rosas Jr. I hope I'm not being repetitive, and I hope you guys aren't being harsh on me for siding with a lot of these favorites, even though I picked my fair amount of underdogs. But for saying that there's more value on the dog but not going through with the pick on the dog here, I gotta lean Raul Rosas Jr. I mean, when you see the gas tank and the pace he pushes with his grappling, there's just no way I'm not picking my boy Raul Rosas Jr. You guys know I've been a big fan of his since his performance on Dana White's Contender Series. I love the fact that he's coming in so young, and I love the fact that we get to see him have such a long journey throughout his fighting career, right? Watching him fight in the octagon, hopefully from the age of 18 all the way up to maybe it's 37, 38. I mean, imagine watching him for decades like that. And I just think he has a cool personality, and I've seen a lot of people online digging at him and whatnot based on his appearance, and I'm not really with that. And I just think it'd be cool to watch him continue to rise to the top. And I love the fact that he has a little bit of edginess to him as well. He does. He has a little bit of edginess to him, and I like that. And I am going to pick him to win this fight. We saw that JSP was able to kind of use his wrestling to take control of that fight against C-Rod, and I think that Raul Rosas Jr. can do something very similar here. Don't be shocked if we see the continuing development from C-Rod's game, which we saw in his last fight. Again, he's so young, you're going to see that growth in a major way, fight to fight. Don't be shocked if you see him have some success with his jiu-jitsu, or if he keeps his fight on the feet, being able to outpoint a guy like a kid like Raul Rosas Jr. So the betting line's off, but I am going to pick Raul Rosas Jr. value on C-Rod. Hey, real quick, if you're looking to work with me for my official plays, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I got my email scrolling below. I got my Instagram and Twitter below as well. Shoot me a DM on either one of those, and I'll be sure to get you my pricing for my official plays. I'm telling you, this card is going to be profitable. I really, really like the spots that we're going after, and it's going to be a profitable one. It's a giant card. Work with the teller. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. Adrian Yanez getting the step up in competition against Rob Font, the current number 6 ranked bantamweight fighter here. We know that Yanez is coming off that nasty knockout victory over Tony Kelly, and he's been going out there just starching dudes left and right. But again, this is a step up in competition. If you take a look at the list of names that Yanez has been taken out, you really can't say that there's any names that are similar to a Rob Font. I mean, Tony Kelly, Davey Grant, he had the split decision. He didn't even get the knockout there, but knockout victory over Randy Costa, Gustavo Lopez, Victor Rodriguez. I mean, Rob Font, in my opinion, is more battle tested at this point in time. But when you actually break down the tape on a fighter like Adrian Yanez, you have to be impressed with his boxing skills. The boxing skills that he possesses are about as good as you'll see in the octagon. I truly believe that. And we've seen some of the big fighters in the UFC actually give praise towards Adrian Yanez's way. I forget who it was. It might have been Nate Diaz. It was someone really big in the game that was actually pointing out how technical and how solid Adrian Yanez's boxing skills are. He's extremely calm and composed too. I mean, he waits on his shots. Beautiful counter punches. He'll set up there. He's 29 years old. He's cruising into his prime. And, you know, as I was just showing the clip there, I mean, I still remember sitting there chatting it up with Adrian Yanez as his girlfriend's walking in the door, coming home from work, and he's sitting in a small apartment. I could only imagine how much his life has changed since I was talking to him just a few years ago. He since won a bunch of UFC fights, and he's currently the 12th ranked bantamweight fighter in the world, and he's about to go out there and most likely get a victory over the number 6 bantamweight fighter in Rob Font and cruise his way towards the top of the division. So it's been a real treat to watch. He's now 16-3, stringing off these victories. I mean, his resume is getting quite impressive. We talked about he needs to get that big name under his belt. Here's his opportunity. This is a great stylistic matchup as well as Rob Font. We know that Font favors his boxing as well. And I think that these guys are going to go tit for tat. They're going to go toe-to-toe on the feet. We know that Rob Font never shies from that type of fight, especially as we saw in his last couple fights where he went to war with Marlon Chito Vera. We know that he didn't get the nod in that fight, but you know, it's pretty crazy. I mean, he was landing significant strike records in that fight against Vera. Yeah, he really was. I mean, he started that fight so strongly. I mean, he bursted out of the gates. It's just that Vera was hitting him with the more impactful shots and was dropping him, and he was stealing those rounds at the end of each round. I still say that performance was very impressive, and I think that if he can carry some of that into this fight, I mean, he could definitely have some success here. He's going to be pushing the pace on Yanez. We talked about the fact that Yanez at times in his fights could be a little bit patient, looking for that counter shot, and that could be dangerous as well when you got a guy like Font on the front foot, just pressuring you, bombarding you with strikes. So hopefully Yanez doesn't find himself in trouble there. I mean, if you want to point out any trouble that we've seen Yanez have in the octagon, I mean, you could say the Davey Grant fight, which he won via split decision. He did face some early adversity in that fight, if you remember. And the Randy Costa fight, where he ended up getting the knockout. He felt a lot of adversity, faced a lot of adversity early on in that fight too. Costa had a lot of success. Costa took the first round there. Yanez was bloodied up, but you have to have loved the composure that Yanez showed, just being patient, coming out, and eventually landing that big shot, taking that fight over. I think that this is a real fan-pleasing type of fight. I think everyone's going to be amped up when we see these two set to square off, and I think that we see somebody get hurt very badly. And I'm going to say that it's going to be Rob Font. He's been taking a lot of damage as of recently. I know that he has a granite chin and he's a very durable fighter. I mean, you take a look at his 6 losses. He's never been finished via KO or TKO. That's very impressive. But he's facing a guy now who has 16 victories and 10 of them are by way of KO/TKO. And again, there's only so much damage you could take. You're 35 years old. I do believe that Yanez is very live for the KO here, possibly a TKO. Maybe he opens up a cut on Rob Font, or maybe they just have to stop the fight. Maybe he goes out in a shield. You know, he doesn't necessarily fall to the ground, but maybe we see Rob Font kind of balled up against the cage with Yanez teeing off on him. I could see something similar to that. Font will bring in a 1.5-inch reach advantage here. Not overly concerned with that. I just think that Yanez will be slightly more technical. If Vera was able to capitalize and land those big shots in their most recent fight, I could see Yanez really picking those shots and precisely landing some of those big type of shots like that too, and dropping Font and hurting him, or just stealing those rounds just as Vera did. So I am on Adrian Yanez to get the job done there. And that there's no bias there. There's no bias based on the fact that I've interviewed him and he was pleasant enough to give me some time of his day. Nothing like that. I mean, I got to lean Adrian Yanez here. Let's go take a look at the betting line. Adrian Yanez is a -175 favorite. Oh, man. You know, I'm not really crazy about that line either. I mean, I think that there's a lot of tough lines on this card. I do think that Font could have some success. We talked about the activity he just put out in that fight against Vera, and we talked about some of the slow starts that Adrian Yanez has had. And if Yanez doesn't get things going quick enough, I mean, we could see Font maybe steal some rounds here, maybe steals round 1 and 2, and just kind of lands on Yanez early, like we saw Yanez landed on against when he fought Costa or Davy Grant. I'm going to say that Yanez even steps his game up to another level here, lands some big shots, and I will take Yanez, but I'm not crazy about the minus 175 line. I think it's a decently accurate line, but I may even point towards the value being on a Rob Font line here at plus 148. Again, I'll stick to the script here. I said that the value is favored towards the dogs a lot throughout this card, and again, here we go. Now, ever since Gilbert Burns took that loss to Kamaru Usman, where he was finished in the first round in devastating fashion, you really have to admire the way he went back to the drawing board. Victories over Stephen Thompson since that fight. The performance that he had against Khamzat Chimaev was very impressive, to say the least. A lot of people thought that he may have even won that fight. I think it was a W no matter how you spin it. And then the victory that he just had where he finished Neil Magny, one of the more decorated fighters in the division. I mean, Gilbert Burns is without a doubt hitting his stride right now at the age of 36 years old, which is crazy. Jorge Masvidal is 38. I mean, there's really not too much of an age difference, really, when you think about how old Masvidal sounds, right, when you say 38 years old. But, I mean, I will say this much, though. The years do get magnified as you get towards the late 30s, right? I mean, 2-year difference isn't as big of a deal when it's 32 to 34 compared to 38 to 36. But I'm very interested to see how Jorge Masvidal looks in this fight. We just all heard him on the Joe Rogan Experience. I mean, he sounds extremely confident going into this fight. He thinks he's going to go out here and break Gilbert Burns' face. He thinks he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Gilbert Burns with ease, which you guys know that's a stylistic clash here. Gilbert Burns has really been using his wrestling, most importantly, to get the fight down to the mat, where we know he's an extremely decorated jiu-jitsu player, but he's been using his grappling to handle these fights. And if he's able to continuously get takedowns against Masvidal in similar fashion to what Covington did, I think it's going to be a walk in the park for Burns. If he struggles in that light, I think Masvidal does have the potential to have some real success on the feet, but I would also say that Gilbert Burns is not a slouch in the striking department. It can really, he can give Masvidal some issues there, right? Don't forget that we just saw Masvidal get starched by Kamaru Usman on the feet, even worse than what we saw happen to Burns in that matchup there. So do not be surprised if Burns gets the better of Masvidal and in all types of ways in this fight here. I want to be clear there. I just don't know what Masvidal we're going to get here. He's coming off a fight where he was dominated by Covington. It's a little bit of a long layoff. He says he's been training and he's been really working on his craft. He was even having Bo Nickal's dad work with him on his wrestling and his grappling. Obviously, he gets some of the best training and trains with some of the best people in the world over at American Top Team. He's lucky enough to, or fortunate enough to have those type of people around him. If he's really been sharpening up those things, can keep this fight standing, there is potential he could land a big shot, just as Usman did on Burns as well. I think on the feet, this fight can go a variety of ways. I'm very intrigued to see how this fight goes. You take a look at some of the numbers here. Out of Gilbert Burns' 5 losses, 3 were via decision. There was 2 knockout losses there. We know that Masvidal is a danger striker, 12 KOs throughout his career. I mean, he is live to put you out. I don't know if we're going to see anything similar to what we saw when Masvidal squared off against Askren. That'd be a real treat. I don't know about all that, though. 3-inch reach advantage for Masvidal there. He's an inch taller. We know Masvidal has a solid frame for the division, even though he used to fight in the lightweight division. He really has filled into this welterweight division very nicely. I am siding and I'm saying that Gilbert Burns takes this fight. I've been very impressed with what I've been seeing from him. I've watch some of the training that he puts in and some of the physical training that he puts in. I mean, this guy comes in phenomenal shape, and I just think that he's going to push the pace on Masvidal. I think he's going to solidify those takedowns. He's a minus 425 favorite, so it seems a lot of people are in agreement with me here. I think that there is a recipe for Burns to do something very similar to what Covington just did in that fight. And, down on the mat, Burns is a little bit more live to pull off a sub as well, so be careful for that. To play devil's advocate, I think that Masvidal, if what he's been saying is true, and he's been really working his wrestling and his takedown defense on the feet. He's definitely a major danger and a major threat to Burns there as well. So as we talk about the betting line, I think that there's more value on a plus 330 line on Masvidal as well. I think that this line is a little bit too high for my liking. There's a lot of X factors going on here in this matchup, but Burns has shown to be susceptible to being cracked a little bit here and there, and Masvidal has shown that he is a danger striker. So we'll see how that all plays out, but I would like Burns more around a minus 300 line, minus 280 type of line, in my opinion, if you're going to parlay him or throw a large amount of units on him straight up and try to bring something back. Don't be surprised if Masvidal shows up, and don't forget this fight is taking place in Miami, although Gilbert Burns lives and resides in South Florida as well, in the Broward County area. This isn't Dade County. Jorge Masvidal is the king of the 305. The crowd's going to be going crazy, and these judges will be skewed by the crowd. So understand every little shot Masvidal lands, anything he does here, it's going to be magnified by the crowd. You have to take that into consideration. Hey, you guys, for a big card like this, I'm doing the special. I'm giving you guys 2 events for my official plays. I'm giving you guys 2 free packages for my official plays if you sign up through my referral link for bovada.lv. If you're interested, reach out to me. I'll give you my referral link. You sign up through that. You're going to get an added bonus into your account. Reach out to me through email. I got it scrolling below, MMAfortuneteller@gmail.com. You could also shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter. I got that all scrolling below. Reach out to me. I'll give you that referral link. And again, you're going to get an added bonus into your account. And Bovada.lv is the real deal. You have any questions, feel free to ask me there, and I'll elaborate on what Bovada is all about. Alex Pereira looking to once again go out and dismantle Israel Adesanya. Poor Izzy. This guy Pereira is just really been bullying him throughout his pro fighting career. Of course, dating back to the kickboxing days, obviously following him over into the MMA side of things and knocking him out in that last fight that they just had. Alex Pereira, 35 years old. He's fortunate enough to really have surrounded himself with some legends. Of course, Glover Teixeira. You saw Chuck Liddell helping him out a little bit there as well. Coming over from the kickboxing side of things, I really believe that he's starting to intertwine everything better and better. Obviously, there's still a lot that needs to be worked on. But against a guy in Israel Adesanya, I don't think that the takedown defense or the grappling is going to be too much of an issue. As we saw, it really wasn't in the first fight. Izzy had that one little shot or whatnot. And, in all reality, I think that even if Izzy was to try to use his wrestling or his grappling abilities, which they are below par, obviously, but if he was to try to exploit Alex Pereira's takedown defense or grappling, I think that it would only be to Israel Adesanya's detriment anyway. I think that'll just make him more tired. I expect this fight to take place on the feet. I think that these guys both settle in to a striking type of match once again, and the better striker will prevail here. Now, remember, Israel Adesanya was winning the last fight up until that knockout that he took there. Alex Pereira was really investing into the leg kicks, really damaging Izzy there. Eventually, just teeing off with those heavy hooks. It was just so impressive though, the way that Alex Pereira finished that fight, the way that he smelt blood and just went in and just completely went nonstop until he just put Izzy out, put him out on his feet, right? He was wobbling against the cage. Now, let's also take into consideration, man, Izzy landed a big shot on Pereira to close out the first round. And if there was a little bit more time at the end of that round, I think Israel Adesanya may have had the knockout victory for himself there. So Israel Adesanya is definitely live to show up here and get a knockout victory himself. But if it does go to the judges' scorecards and if he's able to survive, Izzy's obviously very live to win a decision here. Like we said, he was en route to winning that decision before he kind of stumbled there, if you want to say, right? His leg gave out on him, started eating those big shots. And I'll say this much. I expect to see more growth from Alex Pereira going into this fight. From his last fight going into this fight, I expect to see him more comfortable as an MMA fighter. Whereas Izzy, in my opinion, he's still getting better. I'm not going to say that he's completely flatlined with his growth, but I expect to see Pereira grow a lot more. His confidence is going to be higher than ever. And again, he's just going to be mixing in those striking skills that he has into the MMA world even more so. Going into that last fight, he only had 7 pro mixed martial arts fights. Well, Izzy at the time had 24 pro fights. I mean, you're going to see a more magnified growth from Pereira's MMA game, in my opinion. The confidence of knowing how he finished a fight. I think he's going to really step on the gas with that route even more so early. You might even see maybe an earlier finish from Pereira. I think he's going to attack that avenue, which he saw the hole in Izzy's defense even earlier. And understand, I do understand that Izzy's holding the belt here and he shouldn't. I apologize for that. I know someone got offended last time when they saw Usman holding the belt. And this fight's very similar to the Usman versus Leon Edwards fight, right? You had the African-born champ who lost his belt looking for redemption in an immediate rematch, right? I sided with Usman in that last fight. Now, the difference is here is that I had Usman winning the first time around, whereas I actually had Alex Pereira to win this fight the first time they just fought in the MMA side of things, right? I was one of the few people that was on Pereira. It's going to be very hard for me not to pick him again here. That's why I am on Alex Pereira. And that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm not an Izzy fan. You guys know I'm not really an Izzy fan. I will say this, though. I think Izzy handled defeat as good as anybody I've ever seen in the fight game. I'm just not really down with his whole style. You guys know I'm not down with his style. I'm not really going to elaborate and go on too much about that, but I'm not with the whole vibe and the whole thing that he's with. He reminds me of like the modern day millennial type people. I don't even know if millennials, that the new generation, but the whole movement and all that weird stuff, I'm not really with it. And he's just not my type of guy. He's cut from a completely different cloth that I am. I'm a 90s dude, born at the end of the 80s, but grew up through the 90s. I'm just from a whole different type of cloth. And I'm not talking about as far as going to battle. I mean, listen, Izzy's a warrior, but I'm talking about in a lot of other different aspects. I think that he is a dude that tries to act like he's been through a lot of adversity and this and that, but I think that he's really a dude that was fed with the silver spoon, had the luxury to make it over to New Zealand or Australia. And, people think just coming from Africa that that he was coming from a specific type of thing, but not a lot of people realize that Nigeria is actually a very flourishing country and it's a very developed area, right? I mean, I think that his whole persona and everything that he tries to put off is actually not what it seems. I think that he's actually a dude that's fed from a silver spoon, and he just seems like a spoiled brat in my opinion. But I'm not going to go on too much about that. I could say a lot of stuff, but I shouldn't. But I'm taking Alex Pereira because I picked him the first time around. He came through for me. His striking is just so dangerous. I think that he's going to find the knockout again. I think he finds the finish here and gets the finish over Israel Adesanya, maybe even a little bit earlier, maybe in the third round, fourth round. But I think Izzy's live for a decision victory, and I think this fight can go a variety of ways. Let's go pull up the betting line. I'm going to say there's more value on Pereira at a plus 115 line because I'm edging him to take the fight. He's the current champ. He just got the job done in the last fight. He got the job done over on the kickboxing side of things. He has Izzy's number. How do you pick against him here, and how do you say there's not value on that plus 115 line if you have to pick? It's a dangerous fight either way, but you got to side the value with Alex Pereira. Give me Alex Pereira to get the finish before the fifth round this time. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up the big UFC 287 fight card. I appreciate all you guys that rolled through this entire video with me. You guys mean a lot to me. Please hit that like button as you make your way out of here. Subscribe if you guys haven't already. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you. You guys can expect a lot of solid content coming your guys' way. You guys know I like to take the tail end of these videos and try to talk about a little bit of something that's not fight related, since I have the luxury of having a couple thousand of you guys in here. I want to give you guys I want to stick with an important message, one I've given in the past before. That is, if you're feeling down in the dumps, man, and I'm talking about in a variety of ways. I hear about a lot of people going through issues where they think that it's mental health related or just depression or even some real weird things, man. I was listening to this guy in the Joe Rogan Experience, a famous country singer, who was talking about this mental issue that he was going through. I don't know if any of you guys caught that. A very famous country singer, Luke Combs, and he was talking about how he had this issue where he had these mental things that would go through his mind that were pretty nasty, pretty crazy, and how he battled with that. And Joe Rogan would ask him, would working out or doing some type of physical activity help with it, right? And he kind of stumbled over his words. And when you look at the guy and you see how overweight he is, it kind of was a little bit transparent that he probably hadn't really gone down that avenue. And I'm not saying I'm a doctor and I know that that would have helped, but something that I have noticed in my life through experience and through research of my own is just physical activity, exercising definitely will make you feel better, and it will help. It will prevent and help treat a lot of those types of issues, man. A lot of those mental issues, a lot of those types of situations, depression, and just going through weird things. I'm telling you guys, anxiety, all that stuff. Go put your running shoes on, start running every day, get to the gym. If you have anxiety about being around people in the first place that can't even make it to the gym, go find some type of trail, some type of track you could run on where there's not a lot of people, and just start hitting it up every day. And I guarantee you a lot of those issues you're going through will slowly dissipate. I'm telling you guys, I promise you, just try it out. It will help. It's helped me in a lot of ways, and I think it's something that you should be doing regardless if you want to live a long and healthy life. Just keep eating healthy, working out, and feeling good about yourself. And I feel for any of you guys that are going through stuff, because I know how life could be. I've been on earth for over 30 something years now, so I know what it's all about, and I know there's some nasty people that surround us, and you just got to learn to cope and deal with things the right way. And that's what it's all about, man. Don't wilt, don't break, don't fall into the pressure of life, man, because there's a lot of people that will try to bring you down, man. I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to me there. Not everybody has your best interests. Certain people that you think have your best interests, people that are around you that you would think want the best for you, or that are supposed to be treating you well, don't. And but on that same token, make sure you're not one of those people, and make sure that you're giving back to the people that are around you, and always take a look at yourself in the mirror and analyze what you're doing and what you're giving back as well. So it goes full circle. All right, I'll leave you guys with that. Enjoy the fights. Please catch me on all my social media. I want to keep up with you guys leading up to this fight. I'll definitely be all over IG and Twitter leading up to, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, right? All right, guys, I appreciate you all. Signing out, Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.